I listened to the preacher, and he brings up randomly Muslims one day because we're out in the country, and he's like, don't do like them Muslims do, and never humiliate yourself and put your face on the ground. He's like, we're Christians. We get on our knees and we ask God. So I went and opened up my Bible. It was like, it hit me really clearly. I was like, Jesus, he fell on his face. He prostrated like the Muslims do. Whenever I got out of high school, I was exposed to different aspects of, without going into it too much, the truth movement, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with it. And they call them truthers or whatever. And I started questioning like the main narrative of everything, not just of 9/11, but just of different things in life. And I started reading through the Bible over and over again and going through a lot of things. And a lot of things started not making sense once I started looking at it critically. And so it wasn't until years later till things happened. But at this point in life, when I was 18 and I started getting in trouble with my alcoholism, we'll just say I gotten in trouble a few more times and had some issues with my drinking. My parents, my dad, I remember one time he came to me, and this was in 2013, and he told me, Brandon, he's like, we love you. You're a great person to be around. We love being around you. But when you drink, he said, you're a miserable person. No one wants to be around you. He said, you're a different person, man. He's like, so, if you're not going to stop, if you can't stop this, then no one wants you around. And something hit me so all the way to my soul. And I'd realized that this was, I couldn't go on anymore if I was going to have meaningful relationships with those who mattered to me. And I got to this point. I was with one of my friends one night, and we were going out and we were talking about, what we're going to do when we're 40. We're like, okay, what are we going to do when we're 40? We're going to save up to where we can have a yacht and we can be traveling on our yachts around the world. And we're going to start up businesses together besides our, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 jobs that we had. And I stood there and I told him, I was like, man, we do the same thing every week. We go to work, then we wait for the weekend. We can't wait till the weekend comes. And I come down here to come meet you guys because they lived, 45 minutes to an hour away from me. And I drive down here with you guys, and then we go drink for 2 nights. I feel really bad about myself. There's no purpose in any of this. It's just day in, day out. There's nothing that I feel fulfilled with. I had this complete emptiness with it. And I told him, I said, there's got to be another way, and I'm going to have to find out what it is. And I promised myself that until the day that I died, I was going to be someone who sought the truth, no matter what, no matter if it changed the way that people looked at me, if I was going to, go against all, whatever, I was going to seek the truth no matter what. And so I kind of made that promise to myself and to God that when I was 18, I said, God, I'm going to seek you in whatever religion that you're in, or if it's and it was pretty soon after this where, one day I'd finally had enough. So I went and opened up my Bible. And it was in the morning. I was sober that morning. I hadn't been drinking or nothing yet. And I opened it up, and it was the part where Jesus, peace be upon him, he prostrated in the garden, where he fell on his face. And he was praying and begging to the Creator, right, to not take this cup from him, and so on and so forth. And I told myself, I said, you know what? Jesus fell. It was like, it hit me really clearly. I was like, Jesus, he fell on his face. He prostrated like the Muslims do. And I remembered a couple weeks before, at this point, I'm going to a cowboy church now. So I'm a non-denominational. I'm not going to Methodist church anymore. I'm going to this cowboy church where everyone wears their cowboy hats and everything else. And I listened to the preacher, and he never, because we don't have any Muslims where I'm from. I had never met a single Muslim till this point in my life. And I'm 26 years old or so. And he brings up randomly Muslims one day. And he's like, don't do like them Muslims do, and never humiliate yourself and put your face on the ground. He's like, we're Christians. We get on our knees and we ask God. We don't put our face in the dirt. And that was a couple weeks before. And so that day when I had finally just, gave up, and I was like, you know what, God, I don't know what the truth is. I've been looking in the Hindu scriptures. I've been looking in Christianity throughout all these sects and all this other stuff. I was like, I can't find it. And when I opened up and I saw Jesus prostrating there in the Bible, I said, how dare he say humiliate? Because, even though I don't worship Jesus, he's my, my role model. And he said humiliate. I would understand if he said humble yourself, but he said humiliate. And so I had this like feeling of kind of rebellion, like, not to Jesus or to God, but to the pastor. I said, how dare you? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do what Jesus did. I'm going to put my head on the ground and I'm going to ask God to guide me. And so I did. And when it happened, everything was clear. I can't explain it to you, Eddie, except that there was no doubt in my mind that God was one. And something was telling me to follow Muhammad for the rest of my life. And so I told myself, if this was real, I got to find out about it. So I actually had a Quran on my shelf because I had a big library in my house. This is one of the books I haven't read. And so I'm going to actually read it, and as soon as I opened up the book, Eddie, that first page I started reading, I could not stop crying. I read from Fatiha, and then I would go to open up to another part. And every single word that I read, even though it was an English translation,
of the
it
Quran
resonated with me, of the Quran. I couldn't stop. It was like a hunger. It was insatiable. I kept reading and reading. Then I would go online and watch YouTube videos like, what is this that I found? I cannot believe this. Who is this Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So I talked to my friend that I knew that was this Palestinian guy. He had actually converted, and it was actually, you got to go do this thing called the Shahada, right? The testimony of faith. And so I was like, well, I already believe it. Like, whatever I got to do, you tell me. And so I drove all the way down to Houston to go meet his brother-in-law. And he's like, well, you have to give Shahada at a masjid on Jummah. So come back on Friday. So I drove all the way back to, Montgomery, back to my home, and waited till Friday. And then I drove an hour and 15 minutes that Friday to go give my Shahada at the masjid. So after the khutbah was over, which was the lecture that every Friday you have a lecture, kind of like a sermon you have at church. But, it was really different for me. Everyone's sitting on the ground, right? And I'm like, where's all the pews? But it was comfortable. It was like, okay, this is some nice carpet, and it smelled really good. I was like, man, I haven't smelled something like this before. And everyone was like so happy and, happy to see me. And after it's over, he calls me up. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Even though I was like, God, whatever you want, I'm going to do it.
Who called you? Who called you? Kamal? Sheikh Kamal?
Yeah, Kamal. He called me up to the front of the masjid because I was sitting, halfway in, and I stand up, and at this point, I still don't know what I'm supposed to say. No one had prepped me on the Shahada, right? I didn't even know the English part of it. I just knew that I believed in God. I believed Muhammad was his messenger, peace be upon him, right? And God was one, and that Jesus was not God, and all this. And so when he calls me up there, he's like, we're gonna, say it in Arabic and in English. Some people do it English and then Arabic, but as soon as the words left my mouth, Eddie, I don't know how to describe it to you. Everything went white. I had this experience that I was just surrounded with light, and it was washing me from the inside out. And the Prophet Muhammad, he talks to us about how whenever a person accepts Islam, that all of their sins are completely forgiven from what they did before. But this was almost like a manifestation of that, and just I had goosebumps and this euphoria that was better than anything I'd ever drank or taken or done before in my entire life. That feeling was better than the most blissful moment times a million. And I couldn't stop crying, and it was crazy. Everyone, I've been through a lot of shahadas, but everyone in the whole audience, all of the other brothers and whatnot, we're all crying together, and Kamal and Mekki's crying, and it was ajib. And I knew in my heart, after I said the testimony of faith, which is I testify that there is no God worthy of worship except for Allah, the God, the one true God alone, and I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of God. The moment those words came out of my mouth, these words, I knew it. It was like it was written that this was truer than even my own name. If I would have said, I am Brandon, the son of Todd, the son of Alfred, that wasn't even as true as that statement that Wow. There is no God but God. There was the ultimate statement I ever made in my life. And so, I live by that statement now.